So, welcome to Real Smart Podcast. This is what we think is your go-to podcast for anything Georgia real estate.
I'm Maura and I'm a realtor and real estate educator.
I am a closing attorney. My name is Cheryl King, and I am also an educator. So, what we're trying to do here is to provide some expert tips and some strategies for other people in the market.
Make sure you click that follow or subscribe button at the top of your podcast app so you don't miss a single episode.
So, let's get real smart and let's get started.
So we are so excited. Cheryl, I hope you are as excited as I am. We have a very special guest with us today, my old friend, old being the length of time I've known him, not calling him old, Jack Cotton, CRS from Cape Cod, Massachusetts. How are you today, Jack?
I'm old, but I'm good.
First, I want to give a little introduction of Jack for any of our listeners who may not know him. Growing up on Cape Cod, Jack found that the supply of scrap lumber from home construction was perfect for building forts and tree houses. And as Jack says, he would retreat to one of his crudely built homes, either in the woods or up in a tree, and all would become right with the world. He remembers this feeling and he calls it the treehouse feeling. In 2005, he purchased a custom treehouse from one of the premier builders in California and arranged for it to be brought across the country along with a tree trunk. And he set it up in his front yard to remind him daily of what drives him in this business and why it's so important to help other people achieve that treehouse feeling. Jack specializes in waterfront estates and village properties. In the business for 50 years, he is known for his integrity and discretion, coupled with a low-key and consultative style. The question he asks himself many times a day is, what is in the best interest of my client? And don't we wish that every real estate agent was asking themselves that question? He believes that is the cornerstone of his success. Most people in the real estate business are in it as a means to an end, but Jack says for him, it is the means and the end. A spouse, father, and grandfather, Jack is an avid cyclist. He also loves boating and can be found exploring the nooks and crannies of Nantucket Sound and neighboring islands throughout the summer, and sometimes while he's teaching a virtual class from his yacht. Welcome, Jack, and we're so glad to have you with us.
Thank you, Maura. It's so much fun to be here with you.
Cheryl, take it away.
Jack's going to actually, So Jack will be coming to the Georgia Association of Realtors conference that we have in Destin in September. He will be there because he's bringing the Residential Real Estate Council class, which is succeeding in the luxury market. And that's going to be our pre-conference full-day class that is on September the 9th. If you haven't already planned to, come down one day early and be there for that. Certainly worth it. Before we get started, though, Jack, we'd like to give you a little bit of an opportunity to do a promo for that class because it's not too late for people to sign up, add an extra day to their hotel, get down there a day early. So if you want to give our listeners any sort of a sneak peek as to what they would expect from the class and why they should certainly be signing up for it.
Oh, that's great. I'm happy to do that. First of all, it's about 8 hours. It's the whole day. It really should be 2 days, but I'm going to cram 2 days into one day and give you lots and lots of value in your investment of one day. We'll talk about an introduction to luxury real estate. We'll talk about the fact that you need to be seen as an expert by luxury clients. I'll teach you the 5 critical areas of expertise you need to have in order to be successful in luxury real estate. We'll talk about sources of luxury listings, and then we'll talk a little bit about luxury preparation, preparing for luxury appointments. We will talk about the listing appointment specifically, maybe touch a little bit about adding value as a buyer agent, as that's all changing now as well. We'll talk about overcoming objections in the luxury market. Some of them are similar to the ones you hear in regular real estate, but there are some new and different ones that you are only going to hear when you're in the $5 million or above area. We will talk about negotiation, although I highly recommend that you take the all-day CRS negotiation class, but we will touch a little bit about negotiation. It's my favorite topic. And we will talk about marketing. We'll talk about budgeting for marketing. We'll talk about how you find luxury buyers who usually are hiding in plain sight. We will then talk about luxury open houses, keeping the listing until it sells, because in some markets it takes a while to sell a luxury home. and then we'll bring it all together, talk about showing, and then I'll answer your questions. It's going to be a fun day. Tons of material to cover. You'll have all kinds of resources. At the end, I've developed all kinds of spreadsheets for pricing, for budgeting in your business, for planning your year in your business. I'm going to give you all that stuff to you. You're going to get a whole Dropbox folder when the class is over with all the resources that I use daily in my business. So I think you'll find it well worth the time.
Well, thank you. And if that doesn't convince some of our members to go ahead and sign up, then I don't know what will. And it's almost like we prepped you with that answer, which we didn't, but that leads me seamlessly into our first question for you, which is, you talked about you have to convince luxury clients that you are the expert, right? So why don't you tell our listeners a little bit about your business? Because I similarly feel that when I invest 8 hours of my time into taking a class, I want to be sure that that instructor is the best person that I should be learning from. And I've taken this class with you, Jack. I'm excited to take it again. Cheryl is not just a closing attorney. She also has her real estate license, although she does not sell. And we are both signed up. So what are some reasons that you are, in my opinion, the very best person for our members to be taking this class from?
Well, as you mentioned in my intro, this is my 50th year in the business, which means that I probably was really young when I started. And I was actually really young. I started my company in my dorm room in college because I knew everything back then. I didn't have to work for another company or another agent to learn the business because I knew everything. You know, you put an ad in the paper, put a sign in the yard, put it in MLS, although I didn't belong to MLS, and pray that it will sell. And I soon found out, like in a matter of weeks, that it really wasn't that simple. If you could have ever seen me back in 1974 and what I looked like, for example, I couldn't really afford to get a haircut. I mean, it's unbelievable. Anyway, it was, I think, divine guidance that brought me to the realization that if I'm going to equalize the playing field between myself and the people who then looked like I do now, gray hair and wrinkles, which means wisdom for many people, I had to find a way to equalize that playing field. And my way to do that was to become seen as an expert in real estate. There's 5 critical areas of expertise you should have in luxury real estate, which I've developed over the years. The number one is you must be seen as an expert in pricing and value, or markets and value. You really need to know your market inside and out. And then number 2, you have to be an expert on pricing. So back in the day, in 1974, we had the whole alphabet. It was a long time ago. We had the whole alphabet. We had all 26 letters, but no one had ever taken C, M, and A and put them together into a CMA. Back in those days, you walked into a house, you looked around, and you said, yeah, this should go on the market for X. That didn't work for me. So I took all these appraisal classes and I would do a narrative appraisal. I didn't call it a CMA because I hadn't learned what CMAs weren't invented yet. But I really pushed this expertise and did a full narrative appraisal every time somebody asked me about the value of their house. And attorneys started to notice this, and especially attorneys who dealt with the wealthy people in my market area, because the 2 things that wealthy people detest, well, they're both taxes, but they're inheritance taxes and property taxes. And both of those taxes require strategies that people take to minimize them. And both of those strategies require yearly CMAs. And that's what I did. I marketed my expertise in markets and value and pricing to the gatekeepers of the wealthy people in my marketplace, showing them that I was an expert, going the extra mile, working harder, doing more than anyone else. It wasn't really a carefully laid out, crafted plan that got me where I am now. It just evolved that way by giving people more and becoming an expert and making the gatekeepers of the rich and famous in my market area look really great. And by the way, let me tell you about my market area. I was just listening to a friend from Houston who came up for my anniversary party, and she works in a big company. And she was saying in Houston, it's like the 5th largest city in the country, 4th or 5th. And she was saying they have like this 18 billionaires who live in Houston with a population of, I think she said 7 million people. My town is a population of 4,500. We have 23 billionaires. So I not typically, but I sometimes have a billionaire on one side of a transaction and sometimes on both sides of a transaction. And so how do I equalize the playing field between myself and them? And that's been my obsession over these 50 years. And I've made every mistake you could possibly think of and then some. And the reason you should take this class with me is because I tell you about all the things that didn't work, and I tell you about all the stuff that I messed up, in addition to telling you what does work and the successes I've had along the way as well.
Wow.
So
Well,
what are you, go ahead, Maura.
no, I was just going to say, if that doesn't sell the class to our members, I don't know what will.
No, it's been
Ab-
it's
Go
been
ahead.
fun. It's been a miracle when I look back over the years, and the people I would never have gotten to meet the people I've gotten to meet in any other profession, especially at the age I got to meet them. One of my clients was she was old at the time, and she was in her beach house sitting there having lunch with the President of the United States after his first world tour. And he was the youngest president we ever had. And he had noticed all these gardens in the capitals he visited around the world. And he said to her, your country needs you. Your country needs you to design a garden for our country. And she was an amateur landscaper. She liked overseeing her yard. She had about 24 people working in the yard of this one property we ultimately sold for her. And she finally agreed, even though she was an amateur, and she designed what we now all know as the Rose Garden. And so getting to do with people like this who were a part of history was just a real thrill for me. And it was because of their understanding or feeling that I had the expertise they needed to achieve the goals they wanted to achieve.
You were talking about earlier the differences between where you are and people that you were talking to in Texas. So in terms of what we'll be discussing with the class and some of the experiences you've had because you have been able to speak with agents around the country, what do you see as like the current demand trends? Is this something that when we're looking at this market, that there's anything that is like a bit or big national takeaways, or is every market really sort of hyper focused?
Every market is local, but there's a number one thing that I think connects all the luxury markets across the country. And I can illustrate it with running into a guy at the post office in my little village here. And he's like the number 2 guy in the largest investment company in the world. And he was buying another waterfront house. I'm like, why are you buying another waterfront property? You already have one. And he said, keep in mind, his company's investing your 401k money in the stock market. And he said to me, well, the stock market's pretty pricey. Interest rates aren't that great, and they're not going to last a really long time. I believe that real estate in this location is the best place to park money. It may not go up in value a whole lot, but it's safe. So from that encounter, I've sort of made this little jump of faith in saying that real estate in rare and beautiful places across this great country is gold you can use, or the other gold. It's a safe haven. It's a store of value that you can actually use, enjoy, rebuild, refresh, rejuvenate relationships that you have with your family and friends, and have this capital safety over time as well. I think that permeates a market across the country in any rare and beautiful place that we are so blessed to call home.
I would have to agree with you. Having taught, in April, I always teach a lot of fair housing classes, and we talk about it from the affordability standpoint. And there are a lot of studies about, different levels of economic development and things like that. And we talk about it usually about the lowest quartile, the lowest 25% of people, and that it is really, if they have any wealth whatsoever, it really is in real estate. But when you're looking at those numbers, you also look at it at all levels of it. And even at the highest ends of income, you're still looking at primary residences being, around 40% of what people's net worth is. And then when you add in other real estate that they may own, it jumps up into the 70% areas. So
Right.
I really think that's an important thing to remember.
Yeah, and my market is primarily a second and third home market where there's very few people here living in a primary residence more than $1 million. It's all summer people or retirement people.
So,
which makes it discretionary, which makes it way more challenging for a real estate person to do business, because we're dealing with people who, like, the motivation is not always there.
And you mentioned that, of course, you know, we learned from our very first days in real estate that real estate is hyper local, but then you drew some interesting parallels about luxury real estate around the country. So are there certain characteristics of luxury home buyers or sellers that are kind of blanket across the entire across the country for all luxury home buyers and sellers that agents need to keep in mind, characteristics about the buyers and sellers themselves or about their wants and needs that don't really change from market to market?
Besides being rich?
Besides the amount of money in the bank.
Yeah, they do. They have, well, they have a lot of common needs. And in no particular order, my favorite need that they have that they don't always understand or realize is down somewhere deep, and sometimes we have to bring it out for them. They need to repair relationships. People, especially self-made people who've become successful enough to afford a $5 or $10 or $20 million second home, they skipped a few things during the course of their careers. They skipped some family dinners, they skipped some recitals, they skipped some graduations, they skipped some really important events in the lives of their families and friends. And for many of them, a second home is going to be the magnet that pulls the family back together again, where they're going to refresh, recharge, and rejuvenate those relationships they had that have been damaged over the years. And they fantasize about Thanksgiving or Christmas or 4th of July or some holiday where they all come together because the home is so attractive, whether it's in Jackson Hole or whether it's in Destin, Florida, or up in Cape Cod. It's the magnet that's going to pull the people back together, and they're going to build memories. I have a house for sale now. It's kind of a fixer-upper cottage on the ocean. And the seller was telling me the story. It's third generation, and they have this porch with a long table that can fit like 20 people at the dining table. And he said, every night before dinner, we all sit at this table, we all hold hands. This is even hard to talk about, and I'm just the agent. We all hold hands, we close our eyes, and we listen to the ocean for a minute and a half. And then we all talk about our blessings, our gratitude, and how much we love each other, and how grateful we are to be here together for dinner tonight. That's the fantasy, that's the pull, that's the draw, that's the magnet that pulls these people into luxury homes all over the place, because one person might like the sea, another person might like the mountains, another person might like the golf course, but it pulls the families back together again. And that's what I'm so excited for me to be a part of, because that's sort of a offshoot from the Treehouse Feeling.
So, and not to be manipulative when you're working with that
Never.
type of client, but is that something that it's helpful for you as the agent to evoke, you know, when you're marketing that property or when you're working with a buyer, getting them to imagine, getting them to talk about, like, what do you see you and your family doing here, and getting them to sort of start that process?
I don't see it as manipulative. I see it as my calling. And helping to be the conduit to make that happen for them. And there's just huge satisfaction that comes from that. I remember sitting in one house in August of one year, maybe early September, and the guy had paid top dollar for this house, like whatever. And he was saying, you know what, Jack, I think I paid like $1 million more than this house is worth. I said, really? And he goes, yeah. And but he said, you know what? My son came to visit for the afternoon. He stayed for the weekend. He's talking about getting a summer job here next year. I would have paid $5 million more. That's the core that draws people to beautiful areas like this. It's a store of value. It helps them repair family, helps them rebuild their families. And it's just cool to be a part of it.
And I think that in all markets, I think what you all help for, because as you said, I'm not someone who's selling every day. I think that ability to help somebody draw the picture and visualize the picture is important, and I think it's one of, it's the thing you can't get from just doing some Google searches, and it's certainly some of the value that you all bring to it.
Right.
What do you think the luxury home market, like, what do you, if you had a crystal ball, and I have one, but it's currently on the fritz.
Mine's
But
cracked
if you,
also,
if you had a crystal ball and you could speculate as to what you think, the short term, the next 5 to 10 years, what we'll see in terms of trends, do you think it's more of the same, or do you think there's different things coming down the pike?
I think it's more of the same. I think with all the turmoil, all the tumult, all the controversy, all the angst, the need to feel that treehouse feeling, even if you don't understand that's what it is stronger and stronger and stronger. And so people are going to retreat more to real estate to be in that safe space. The sad thing is that the state of the economy is that it's very hard for people to get a foothold in that market. So I feel really bad for, first-time home buyers and people just starting out who want to get their first home and be riding the bus instead of chasing the bus. It's not really a segment that we are in a lot, but it's going to become more and more difficult for them because everything that goes into a house comes from the ground, and everything that comes from the ground is the most susceptible thing to inflation. I don't care if it's concrete, I don't care if it's steel, copper, lumber, lead, whatever goes into a house comes out of the ground. Whatever comes out of the ground is most impacted by inflation. So while there's always dips and valleys in the market over time, the overall trend is nowhere but up. It's always, we've seen, little retreats along the way, but the overall trend is always up. The replacement cost of real estate is always going to have an impact on the purchase price of second home or second-hand homes or previously lived in homes. So I believe the prices will continue to keep going up, sadly, at a rate that makes it very difficult for a lot of people to catch the bus. I wish there were some other ways to make that possible, but find a way to get your first house, find a way to help other people get their first house. It's so critical.
Yeah, as my grandfather said, they're not making any more land.
You're really
So
not.
you need to buy your piece of it while you can. And we know, anybody who's been paying attention in the last couple of years, we all know and feel low inventory. We all have at least minimal knowledge of the, lawsuits, proposed settlement terms from NAR and the copycat lawsuits that are going on around the country. So we know the challenges that our industry is facing overall, but specifically for people like you who already work in luxury. And I know people in your segment, that's a very small segment of the real estate agent population. But for those that are going to take this class on September 9th, or for people who have taken your class recently and they're thinking about dipping their toe into that luxury market, what are the challenges that agents will be facing specifically with luxury clients, given the real estate landscape that we're currently experiencing, and what the challenges we're going to face into the near future?
The number one challenge they face is their own mindset, that they think wealthy people are different than they are, and they're really not. They think they had to be born rich and well connected in order to be successful in luxury real estate. It's all up here. So what they're going to learn in my class is that is absolutely not the case. If you can pull it off, it's great. If you can possibly find a way to have been born rich and well connected, and you play your cards right, it really can work out well. I have a couple of competitors like that. But if you weren't born that way and you want to succeed in the luxury arena, we will give you the tools, which I think will help you develop the confidence that will help you break into the luxury market. And at the very least, you will learn ways to treat everyone like $1 million, regardless of their price point.
I definitely think that there are, just in hearing some of your descriptions, some things that, some new ways of thinking about things that would apply at all levels, but that would, that are specific to luxury, but making everyone feel like $1 million is certainly also a mental image that's worth captivating there. Do you think that, with regard to some of the things that you both alluded to, the changes in the market and things like that, and we've got some proposed settlement that may come into effect, do you think that the NAR settlement and some of the other things that are swirling around, does it affect luxury more or less the same? What are your thoughts on that?
I guess we'll find out. But if you're going to sit down with a buyer and say, by the way, my fee for services and your price point is going to be $300,000, I mean, you better be able to convey your value. So I've always been, even before this came down the pike, and you'll catch this from me in the first hour of the all-day class. I'm obsessed with having value and conveying value. So we've always sort of geared that more towards the sell side than the buy side, especially old people like me are more geared towards sellers and buyers. So you really need to, and I'm working on that now, I'm actually doing a webinar for CRS on August something about your value proposition as a buyer agent in a changing market. You really have to bring value that outweighs your cost. And you do already, but most of us do anyway. What we don't do well is articulate it. What we don't do well is convey that to buyers. So we need to become more consultative with our buyers. There's going to be no more meeting in a driveway, signing an agency disclosure form on the hood of a car. You're going to be sitting down with a buyer now, like you do with a seller, for an hour or two, going through a whole presentation where you convey your value to them and explain the process to them and get them to sign on. So it's kind of been overdue, and I can't change all this stuff. I'm just me. But what I can do is understand what's going on and make the most of it. And I think what solves every single problem, Mike Ferry used to say this, one good listing will solve almost any problem that you have. But now you have to, the other problem you have to solve is, am I bringing enough value to the table? How do I quantify that? And how do I get the seller and the buyer to buy into that value that I bring to the proposition of buying or selling a house? Value, value, value.
Yeah, and with the exception of that, navigating that written buyer agreement question, because what you'll hear when you get down here, down to Destin, Jack, is that we've had written buyer agreements and mandatory buyer brokerage in Georgia for, gosh, almost 30 years.
No
So
kidding.
for us, yeah, it's not new, but for some of our agents, enforcement is new. So they are in a little bit of a panic mode, the same as some markets that haven't used agreements. But
Right.
with the exception of those buyer agreements, how has the market in the last 12 months, with the news on national news media about the big lawsuit in Missouri, and then of course all of NAR's headlines with the proposed settlement, how does it change the way, or how has it changed the way that you talk to your buyers and sellers about value? Has that changed at all?
Not a lot. I mean, obviously, we're hearing it more from sellers so far. And I use a David Knox quote all the time because it's so beautiful. And basically, this is so great. We don't have to pay a buyer agent anymore. And my response is that you're absolutely right. You do not have to pay a buyer's agent anymore. But let me ask you this, Maura, why wouldn't you?
That's right. That's right. Yeah. And my conversation, and Cheryl and I talk about this a lot because she and I both teach a good bit. She teaches our contract forms in the state a lot. But that's my attitude about buyer agreements. Why wouldn't you want a written agreement with your agent to ensure that they have your best interests at heart? You have a confidentiality agreement. We would never stick a sign in the yard and put a price on a house and list it without a written agreement. So for me, it's always been, of course we would have a written buyer agreement.
Right. Again, the biggest challenge is mindset, and the biggest mindset challenge is with the old realtors like me. So because we haven't done it that way, and so we have to change a little bit, and change is never fun, but change is always here. So we roll with it. We figure out, we strategize, we roll with it, we figure out how to make it work. And basically, again, it's identifying, articulating, and conveying your value. That's all people care about.
And I think that first of all, this class and that discussion of value is going to be prescient at any price point. And I'm glad that we all are doing this. I do think that there are some people who think they can just drop into this market and just become a luxury agent by proximity. And I can tell from everything that you're saying that what they'll get out of it is that you are worth what you deliver at the end of the day. And I believe in what you all deliver as realtors. I had someone who is a good friend who I saw her at a conference a few years ago, and she had just gotten into real estate, and she's like, I just really think I could sell in your neighborhood. I'm like, well, you can, and the other 20 real estate agents that live in my neighborhood can as well. But just being here isn't enough. It's a matter of what you're doing, what you're bringing, and what people are getting for that. And I think that this class is absolutely well timed. Because I think that discussion and believing in your value is going to be something that all real estate agents, particularly realtors, should be considering.
And those are the magic words that I should have thought of a second ago. You need to believe in your value. Because even on the selling side, selling agents, a lot of agents don't believe in their value, and they don't charge what they should charge because they don't believe they're worth it. And if you don't think you're worth it, no buyer or seller is ever going to think you're worth it.
That's right. That's right. And I love that in a lot of what you've said over the course of the last 30 minutes or so, Jack, you've made the point that these are not just tactics and strategies that are applicable in a market of $5 million houses and up. You need to know your value for the first-time home buyer. You need to know your value for someone buying in a much lower price point. So even some of our members who say, well, I live in a market where our highest price is $400,000. What would I do with a luxury class? You can still take those tools and apply it to your own business, even if you don't have $5 million properties and up.
Absolutely. Because people ask me this all the time, because I am not one who discriminates on price range. If it's in my little neck of the woods, I don't care what the price is. We sold, I think it was last year, it was basically a tool shed with a kitchen. And I can't remember the price, but it was like, I don't know, I'm going to say 300 grand, which for our market is ridiculous. And I remember the year I had my biggest sale, which was like 19, the same month I closed the $19 million house, I closed one for 157. Well, guess what? The $150,000 sale was life-changing for that seller. She was able to afford the kind of care she needed in the last year of her life, which she otherwise would not have been able to afford. The $19 million lady was one of like 5 houses. She was just cleaning things up, just getting her estate cleaned up. And so, we don't discriminate on price. If it's in our area, we take it. But we basically, and I shouldn't really, I will admit this, we basically do most of the same things, whether it's 5 million or 500. I can't do it any other way. Now, we may have fewer pages in a brochure. The video may be shorter. Maybe we do 1 or 2 videos instead of the 3 that we normally do per listing. But pretty much we do the same thing, whether it's 500 or 5 million, we just step it up for the 5 million, maybe go a little bit deeper on the story. But that $500,000 house for that person, that's everything to them.
Mm-hmm.
So we treat it like that.
Well, and this is the kind of luxury class that I wish every realtor would take. Because the very first one I took in my career, Jack, forever ago, I don't know, 16, 17 years ago, I sat, and I use this example all the time when I teach. I sat in a room with an instructor who shall remain nameless to protect the not so innocent. And that person said, if you want to up your price point, what you need to do is stop calling back the people in the price points that you consider too low for you. And I walked out of that room thinking, I just took the worst class. That's the worst advice you could ever give, because the person buying that $100,000 house or $200,000 house, someday they're going to meet someone and they're going to get married, or they're going to have children, or they're going to get a promotion, or they're going to have some life circumstances that allow them the flexibility perhaps to move up. And if you did a great job for them when they were buying the $100,000 house, they're going to call you back when they're ready to buy the $500,000 house. And I love that even, we get to hear from you that your marketing is the same, whether it is a quote unquote tool shed with a kitchen or a beautiful, huge waterfront estate with that big table that seats 20 people where they can, close their eyes and listen to the ocean. And I think that's what more agents need to hear.
Right. And, you know, just as an aside, when I told that story about the guy who thought he overpaid by $1 million, it was a $5.5 million house. Well, the first house he bought when he came into town was 157,000, little cottage to see if he liked it here. And then he decided he liked it here, so he bought a condo for his mother for $400,000. And then he decided he liked it here a lot, so he bought a water view house for $950,000 and tore it down. And then he started building a new house, and as he was just about to move into his new house that he built after tearing down the $900,000 house, the guy who empties the dumpster decided to do that at 2 o'clock in the morning and piss off all the neighbors. So he was having a fight in the front lawn with the neighbors at 2 o'clock in the morning, about a week before he's going to move into the house. So he put it on the market, bought the other one for 5.5, and then sold this one for 4.5. So, you know, you're right. You never know what something is going to end with when it starts. We don't look at it that way. We just take every deal on its own. But you don't know who someone's related to. You don't know who someone knows. It's just so much easier to treat everybody like $1 million, and whatever is going to happen is going to happen.
I think that's the key in the remembrance. We treat everyone like $1 million, and the rest of it works itself out, right?
We spend like 40% of our time at work. How about this? Let's have it be fun, and let's eliminate the stress by treating everyone great.
That's right. And I want to just before we start to wrap up, you've mentioned it a few times, mentioned it in your bio, but you talk about in your bio, and I know you'll mention it in class, you talk about the treehouse feeling and how you incorporate that childhood memory into your business and into the way that you deal with clients. How often do you talk about it to your clients? And would you expand on it a little bit for us so that our listeners can have a little bit better understanding of the treehouse feeling?
Yeah, it's very personal. I do have a video, I think, on my Jack Cotton Realtor website about I think I've seen in front of my treehouse, the one I had built in California. It's hard to talk about, actually, but things weren't that great when I was a kid. And so it was my safety, it was my escape, it was my oasis from the storms of life. And it's a feeling I never, ever, ever got away from. So that I had minor career deviation paths during my school years, like firefighter, oceanographer. But real estate was the undercurrent, and that's all I ever did. It's all I ever wanted to do. It's all I've done. So for these past 50 years, but I built a foundation as an 8-year-old, building my own houses and just understanding how important that feeling is. And I don't care if you're living in a one-room shack or, you know, a multi-million-dollar mansion. The feeling is the same. It's your oasis from the storms of life. You're safe here. Everything's good here. I'm gonna be okay here. And that's a feeling that, you know, that's what I don't want to get too weird, but that's what drives me in this business.
Well, and like you said, that goes across all price points. Selling that $100,000 house means everything to that seller. That feeling can mean this as much to a first-time home buyer as it does to that person looking to reconnect with their family in their $5 million home because they missed the dance recitals and the family dinners and the holidays. Right. So thank you for sharing about that.
And I can feel it when I walk into a house. I can feel like I really don't like walking into divorce houses. I can feel it. But like I listed a house a couple of years ago, and the seller, my gosh, she was this beautiful woman. Oh my gosh. And she had the most incredible, beautiful hair and piercing blue eyes. And she was like 86 years old. And she had been in this house since she was like 8 years old when her parents first bought it, and she was still there. And it was a wreck. It was on the water, but it was a wreck. But beautiful land and great location. But I could, and the other person I was competing with walked into her house and said, yeah, this is a tear down. Someone's going to tear this house down. And I don't care if it's $1 million house or a $500,000 house. You don't walk into somebody's house and say, someone's going to tear this down. Maybe they will. It's their house. It's where she had 86 years or 80 years of memories in this house. You know, you have to, how do I say this? You have to be open and receptive to the feeling that comes when you walk into a house like that. Mm-hmm. It's practice. and be aware.
I think it's respecting the history and respecting the meaning of the home, which is a lot more than just, you know, sticks and mortar and
Right.
bricks and things like that.
But it's a living thing.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, gosh, is there
Yeah.
anything that we didn't ask you about today, Jack? Is there anything we didn't cover that you would like to say before we wrap up?
No, I think we covered a lot. I'll just say that I hope you all come to the class. I love teaching the class. I'm sure there's better teachers. I'm sure there's better realtors, but there's no one who loves their students more, and there's no one who loves their topic more, and no one who loves to share more. So I'm really excited to be with y'all in a beautiful location in Florida.
All right. Well, we know that the course is going to provide incredible information. I know it because I've taken it before, but we are certainly hoping that we're going to pack out those seats and you'll be able to tell us all about delivering value, pricing luxury properties, marketing negotiation, and everything that you described earlier. And I know that I can't wait to soak it all up with you in Destin, Jack. And so that is a wrap for today's episode of Real Smart. We hope you found our discussion insightful and valuable.
Yes, we love trying to bring something that is current real estate tips, trends, people, and we hope you enjoyed the episode. If you did, please like and subscribe.
And don't forget to share it with your friends and family that you think also might benefit from us.
And if you have any, we were trying, and this is our first guest of season 3. But if you have any ideas for people that you'd like us to bring on or topics that you would like to cover, we'll have contact information in the show notes. We really do want to bring things to you that you want to be listening to.
Thanks for tuning in. Until next time, stay smart and keep learning.
Bye, everyone.